Well, thanks a lot, Apurva, the HCL Technologies, the entire team to have me over. If I'd known there was going to be so many people, I would have got a haircut or something. So you've heard the story of my fame or my infamy, whatever it be. But I wanted to talk about it briefly and share my experience with you. I'm the author of this book, The Bad Boys of Bokaro Jail. And I'm also an HCL employee like all of you. The company that I'm a part of is HCL Infosystems, and within that there is a subsidiary called HCL Learning Ltd, and that's what I run. So I'm the head of that business. So I'll want to talk a little bit about how this whole incident came about, and then I'll talk about how I dealt with it, more or less. And then if I'll maybe speak for 15-20 minutes, and then I'll open it up to questions. So whatever questions you have, then we can have a conversation. It's usually more fun like that. So I've been in the education business on and off for about 15 years now. Totally I worked for about 20. The largest time I spent was with the Tata Group, which was about 8 years, out of which 7 years was in Chicago. So I've lived overseas, and I used to be in the outsourcing business during all this time. So your world is a very familiar world for me. And then I moved back to India in 2007 and worked for a variety of different educational entities, including a couple of startups. In the summer of 2007, I had a space where I had exited a startup. I was looking for the next big thing. And one of the very well-known veterans of the industry, a gentleman called Anand Sudarshan, who was the CEO of Manipal, which I'm sure you all have heard of. He called me and he said that there is this opening in this company called Evron. So I poked around, looked on the internet, talked to people that I knew, and then I finally joined Evron. And I joined them on the 3rd of October 2012, which is about a year and a half ago. After I joined Evron, I was handed this division called the Institutional and Consumer Business. And it was the company was struggling, it was failing, but they had got new investors. It was a turnaround story, and they were looking for new management to be able to come in and execute this turnaround, and I was part of that team. So I looked at this entire business and I looked at what all was inside that, and I found that there was one business called Toppers, which was a credible looking business. All the others were fairly iffy, and within Toppers there was this one center in this town called Bokaro, which was the strongest center, where we had 600 students, we had a decent revenue, it was actually a profitable entity, so on and so forth. So in this division which was handed to me, Institutional and Consumer, which sounds really grand, actually there was only one really functional business, and within that really functional business there was actually only one center which was a poster boy based on which you could use as an exemplar of what else the other centers could become. So in that context and this process of discovery, going out, getting the team together, getting a few wins under our belt, I got a call on the 22nd of December saying that, boss, this entire top faculty in the Bokaro center has quit and in one shot has moved to competition. Which means that this one poster child that I had, this one success story that I had in this entire division which I was supposed to be running, was actually on the verge of collapse. So I got on a plane overnight. It was unfortunate timing, but I got into Bokaro on Saturday morning. So I said, never mind the weekend, Saturday, Sunday, I need to be on the ground. So I got into Bokaro on Saturday morning, and my goal was to meet with all the parents, pacify them, make arrangements for alternative faculty to come in so that we are able to live up to the promises that we had made, and based on that, be able to continue life as usual. Now, as I talk about my experience, I'm thinking that all along the way I've made choices, right? So since I'm talking to, I'm guessing, a whole bunch of tech people, there is the inevitable flowchart that comes into being, right? So the starting point is that, okay, where do so you're looking for a job, you look at Evron, okay, and you have either a yes or a no, right? And I made a considered decision. I looked at the company, I knew it had been in trouble before, I knew that they had new management, but I finally decided on the yes. That led me to a certain division, and therefore the whole set of choices continued. But I'm just walking you through this saying all along I did make a choice. So I can't blame it on circumstances, I can't blame it on fate. I made conscious decisions where I said that yes, I will join Evron. I joined Evron. I found out that what the reality is. Even after I joined, salaries were not coming on time. Salaries were coming 20, 25 days late, sometimes more than a month late. Not news to me. I talked to enough people, I knew that that's how it was. And then I landed up in Bokaro, this whole thing happened. Now when I met with the parents on Saturday, everything went well. But then on Sunday, I met with another set of parents. Those parents were much more activist. And they said that if you're not going to give us an instant refund, we are going to file a police complaint. This was a Sunday, you have to remember. I reached on Saturday. Sunday morning, I'm meeting these guys. Can't make a refund. I can't even reach out. I can't even talk to my top management because they weren't readily available. So on the 4th of, at 4 p.m. on Sunday, the cops came and they took me to the police station. And they said that, boss, you have 24 hours. The complaint has been filed. And if within 24 hours, you're not able to get these people to withdraw the complaint, you're going to be arrested. Which means Sunday night when I was supposed to get back, I was actually in jail. 24th is when I was actually formally arrested and put in jail. That was Christmas Eve. We had a party planned at my house. I was supposed to be back in Gurgaon, which is where I live. Part of the Evron deal was that I'll be flying to Chennai and I'll be working remotely because I wasn't willing to relocate to Chennai. So Sunday comes along, the whole of Saturday night, the whole of Sunday, you can imagine, on the phone, on the computer. I spent the night on a table in the police station. My crew from Bokaro got me some blankets and stuff. It's winter. And spent the night. We did 50 refunds during Sunday. We tried to pacify the parents. I struck a deal with the parents saying, look, the 25 of you will get the refund. Now please go out and convince the other parents that this company is for real, it's credible. But the 25 of them took their refund and went home. So one thing led to another, and at 4 o'clock on Christmas Eve, I was arrested. I've never been to jail before. I didn't know what to expect. And until 4 o'clock on Sunday, I was in denial. I was ki ye nahi hoega. I mean, I've got 20 years of experience. I'm a corporate guy. I'm a senior guy. These people, the owner of the GEMS group is a Bharat Ratna awardee, and so on and so forth. And it was just never in my frame of reference that I could get arrested. It was just out of the question. It was just not in the list of possibilities that I would actually get arrested and go to Bokaro jail. But then they actually arrested me, put me in a jeep, aage 2 policemen, side se 2 policemen, and they took me to jail. So we had a medical test and all of that, and I was petrified. I had absolutely no idea what to expect. I didn't know whether I would get to see the sun, whether I would get beaten, or I would get sexually assaulted, or what would happen to me. So it was just this possibility which I had never even considered in my entire life, that I would land up in jail, and I was 42 years old. So I landed up in jail, went through the whole thing, understood what it was about. And then what emerged in front of me was another set of choices. Now, jail is a strange place. So this is a district jail, everybody's under trial. We have about 275 men and about 8 women who are kept completely separate, so you don't have any interaction with them whatsoever. And these 275 men range from people who've stolen a bicycle to career criminals and murderers who do that for a living, right? There were the guys who were very matter of fact saying कि हाँ, उसको उतारा था तो 8-10 महीना जेल में लगाएंगे फिर निकल जाएंगे. So when you talk to people who are very matter of fact about having killed someone else, it's a little scary. But there were those people also, as much as there were the a wide variety of others. And the choices that I had to make within jail were things like, which ward do I get to stay in? I could choose to stay in the ward where I have the company of such criminals. But that was also the most, that was the ward with the iPod, with the color TV, with inverter 24/7, with a heater, which means you could get hot tea any time of the day, which is not common in jail. Or I could stay in the slum ward where I basically have to sleep on the floor, get cold food, and have to entertain myself every night. So I made choices there. The other big decision that you have to make, once I had secured myself and I figured out that, okay, I'm going to be safe and I'm going to be as comfortable as I can get inside the jail. And the other big thing you have to choose for is, do you have connectivity or not? So obviously they took away my cell phone. Now, all these things find their way into the jail. You can get ganja, you can get cigarettes, of course, you can get alcohol, you can get cell phone access, which is a very, very big thing and really hard. But every one of these things comes with a price tag. That price tag is money, and in addition to the price tag is what is the company you have to keep to avail of those facilities. The ordinary, average, no name, under trial does not get access to the cell phone. But if you're in ward number 9, which is the cool ward, where all the cool people hang out, you can actually get cell phone access. But then you have to hang out with the cool people. So I made a lot of choices. And part of those choices was running. So I'm a runner. I run marathons and stuff. And I decided that that's something I did not want to give up inside the jail, which was strange because the longest distance you could run inside the jail was a 1-minute loop. And I was that time training for the Standard Chartered Mumbai Marathon, which was scheduled for the 20th of January. I'm talking 2013. And as part of the training for that marathon, I was of course also expecting that I won't be in jail for that long. If I'm arrested on the 24th of December, it's a small matter. The case is against the company and not actually against me. I've been wrongly arrested. I should not be in jail for a month, so I was clearly thinking that I'll be out. But I kept running, and the longest distance I ran was 20 kilometers. Now when you want to run 20 kilometers in a 1-minute loop, you're talking about 120 loops of 1 minute each, which is a little nuts. But that was one of the choices that I made. The other choice that I made by about day 3 of my being inside was that I want to start writing about this. Now, I always fancied myself as some kind of writer. I'd never written anything before, I'd never published anything before, but people had told me you write nice emails. Now, I don't know whether that counts or not. But I figured, okay, if I write nice emails, and the one thing I can do inside jail is write. So the third thing I was doing was reading, because that's one thing you can do. They don't have a problem with books. You can talk to people, you can't work on a computer, but you can read. In my case, I could run. And the third thing I decided for myself was I'll write. So I started writing meticulously every day. I figured out how I would get access to a table and chair. So in jail, you don't typically have chairs. So that's a problem if you want to write. You also don't have paper and pen, but I arranged for that, and that was okay. And then I started writing. And for the entire month that I was there, which was a very frustrating month because I felt like there was absolutely no business I had of being in jail for a month. But through that entire month, I wrote. And initially, it was my woohoo story about how this happened to me and so bad and all of that stuff. But very quickly, I realized that and when I started writing, honestly, I had no idea this would get published, and it would not be like a book, and Penguin would not be the publisher. And actually, the surprising thing is I didn't even go to anybody else. I went to Penguin and I told them the story and I said, look, I have a manuscript. They read it and they said, done. They told me to work with this guy called Hussain Zaidi, who's a crime writer. He's written Dongri to Dubai and a few other books. He helped me out a little bit. But fundamentally, I did not even go to publisher number 2, which to me was quite flattering because it says that, okay, I can write better than just email. And so the whole process has been very fulfilling. But you have to remember, when I was in jail in December in 2012, all of this was not even, I was in jail. I mean, that itself was fundamentally screwed up. And being in jail, making this choice, but I still religiously sat down with the hope, with the decision that, I want to do constructive, I want to do positive things with my time. So running was a constructive, positive thing. Writing was one, reading was one. I did not get any alcohol in for me. There was ganja, which was freely available. It's addictive. I didn't try it. So, and believe me, it is tempting at times because you get really depressed. You get really frustrated. You get pissed off with the system. You get pissed off with your employers. You're just really not in a positive state of mind. Through all of that, making the choice that, okay, I want to sit down religiously every day, I want to sit and write. And it's not like I wrote, 30 pages a day, but I gave it a shot every single day. And then what came out at the end of the whole process was a very garbled, confused bunch of notebooks because I was writing on longhand. And then after I came out, I figured out, okay, how is it that I'm actually going to make this whole thing into a book? And that's one of the things Penguin also told me, is that, you know, it's nice, but it's not a book. It's, at best, it's a fairly haphazard diary. But you'll have to create a narrative, you'll have to create a flow. It has to go somewhere, it has to start, it has to end. Now, I can't create a climax, nobody dies in the end. There's no sex. This is 275 men in a jail. But I worked at it. I bought a book called On Writing Well from this guy called William Zinsser. He was really how I learned about writing and how I edited this entire mass of text into something which is now what is available in the marketplace. I was finally released on the 23rd of January, which amongst other things means that I missed the Standard Chartered Mumbai Marathon. I ran it this year. That's how you get this band. So I ran the full marathon in January this year. I made it a point that I would. I don't run a lot of full marathons, but I made it a point that I would because I had to make up for last year. And HCL, I must mention, has been amazing because there is a stigma that comes with having spent a month in jail. Even now when I meet some of my not so close friends, they look at me a little funny. You know, what's going on in their head is ki, theek hai, you went to jail for a month, but nobody spends a month in jail without having done anything, right? So kuch to kiya hoga. So that's always there in the back of people's minds, and it's fine. So one of the decisions, one of the choices again I had was I going to hide the fact that I spent a month in jail? Was I going to get defensive and you know, perpetually be a little embarrassed about it? Or do I want to flip it and say, you know, I'm going to just put it out there. I'm going to shout out loud about the fact that I spent a month in jail. And if you have a problem with it, then it's now really your problem. Because I've said up front as loudly as I could, I printed a book about it. And then I spent a month in jail, fine, I did. Now you deal with it. I don't have to deal with it anymore because I'm done dealing with it. I've made as much as I could about it, right? So it's kind of like flipping the whole thing on its head and saying, now it's your problem. Ab dekho kya karna hai, maine to kitab likh di. So that's kind of really my story. And that's how the whole thing happened. I was talking about the HCL angle. So the HCL angle was that I was obviously looking at what else, what would I do next. I approached HCL through a common reference who was also ex-Tata. You might know that the CEO of HCL Infosystems, Harsh Chitle, is also an ex-Tata person. So having credibility helps because, you know, people were able to say that, you know, this guy is not fundamentally broken. This whole thing was an accident. And I spent about 8 years with the TIS, so that adds up. And the only thing that HCL said, I'm assuming all other things were okay. The only thing that HCL said was that I cannot hire an under trial. So you have to make sure that this case is taken care of. The moment the case is taken care of, we'll take you on board. But we can't wait for you also, which means, you know, get it done. So the fortunate thing was I came out and, like I said, in end Jan, on the 5th of March, the High Court quashed the case. 31st of March was my last day with Everon because obviously I had no desire or intent to work there anymore. Not just because it was fundamentally a negative experience, but because I don't think they did as much as they could to which any, you know, professional and company with strong integrity and values would have done. They did not behave like that. What I did was because I had integrity and values. I had to protect this thing. I had to pacify my customers. So I chose to take a weekend before Christmas and get out there and do what was required. So I did the right thing. I don't think they did the same thing in return. And that's the reason I had to quit Everon. So March I quit Everon, April I joined HCL. So I've been with HCL for almost a year now. And I think it's been a fabulous experience. So that's my story. Now I'll open it up for questions and whatever you guys want to ask, feel free. Sorry? When I came out in January, it was bail. It took them a month to get me out on bail. There were three things, I think. First, the courts are actually shut from the 24th of December till the 2nd of Jan for that vacation. So 8 days went out like that. Second is that the Jharkhand legal system is particularly rotten. I think, I don't know about others, but Jharkhand is supposed to be really, really bad. And the third was everyone didn't put actually a person on the ground till the 17th day of my imprisonment. So people actually traveled to Bokaro, met with the other people, went here and there, didn't even come to the jail or meet me. And I'm talking about 26th, 27th December, and left. But no person was stationed on the ground in Bokaro with the target saying, boss, your job is to get this guy out and I need to see daily reports and I want to see what's happening. And this has to be like crisis number one in the company right now. That was just not coming forward. And that's why it took them a month to get me out on bail.
When do we see a movie of this?
I'd be happy if the book sells a few thousand copies. Movies are much later, if at all. So, and like I said, there's very little sex and there's nobody who gets killed in the end. So I don't know if a movie will come out of it.
The Bad Boys of Bokaro jail.
Yeah.
I mean, like, and you did mention it, very briefly. What probably I would be a little interested in is that how does the dynamics work? Because it's a very different kind of a system, in that place. And you mentioned that there is a ward, and the people in those wards are treated a little differently than others. So what were some of the fundamental differences you found in the way, the system is run there and the system is run outside? Or were they similar?
So, I'm an amateur economist, so I'll try and answer it from that perspective since you're talking about systems. There is a lot to be said about that, and I don't know if I can do justice to it in 2-3 minutes, but I'll try. So basically, what is the driving force outside and inside? It is the profit motive. Okay, HCL Tech, HCL I, we are all about the profit motive. Even inside the jail, it's about a profit motive. Okay, but the jail is not supposed to actually allow cash inside even. It's supposed to be a non-cash entity. It's supposed to be like a kibbutz or one of those, really bohemian Auroville type places where it's a positive community. And there is a lot of that stuff that happens. The prisoners are farming inside. The prisoners do everything. They do the cooking themselves. So it can be like that. But it's corruption and basically a lack of regulation, which is what happens in India outside also, like the Sahara Group, whatever is happening, or it's the lack of regulation, it's the lack of managing that profit motive which messes things up big time. And that's really the difference between what's inside and what's outside is. And outside you have a fair degree of regulation because of which you have legal and ethical systems which keep you in a certain direction and manage behavior. Inside jail, because that is missing, the behavior is completely different. So what happens inside the jail is all the power flows from the cops who are inside the jail. They get to mandate where the supplies go, where the material goes. Small things like there is a daily ration per prisoner. Okay, उसमें चाय पत्ती होती है, दूध होता है, lots of different things. Who gets that? How does that get distributed? How does that happen? And therefore, why is the average prisoner getting bad food, but somebody who can afford to pay ends up getting premium food? So it is a microcosm of what would happen in the world if there was no regulation. It was driven purely by the profit motive, and a few people held power. So that's how that economy works. And of course, it's also driven by fear, because the consequence of not towing the line, if you're a cop, is that you might be mistreated or beaten up. For a cop, the consequence of being too tough on the professional assassin is that he could get bumped off when that guy gets out of jail. So it works on different levels. So it's not that it stops with the cops. There are people that the cops are also scared of. So that's how it works. Yeah.
How was this experience of yours impacted the way you look at business now and the customer?
So there's two answers to that question, and it's a contradictory set of answers. At one level, I say, you can't judge people too harshly. You have to be a little multidimensional when you look at person. And I mean, I look at my own example. I went to jail. I spent a month there. Most employers could come back and say, this guy he's tainted. So I don't think I want to hire him, and I don't know if there's something wrong with him. But HCL did not judge me on that parameter. So I would like to be able to widen that and say that, okay, when you're looking at somebody or some let's say a recruitment profile, you want to look at that in its entirety. You want to dig into the facts and don't form judgments or opinions on the basis of what is just a high level assessment. The flip side to that is, if you have to take a tough decision, you have to deny somebody a deserving increment, let's say. I'm like, worse things can happen, so it's really not such a big deal, just move on. So I've got a thick skin in that sense, but yeah. So that's really kind of how it evens out. Yeah.
So why do you think the company did not try to help you? At the end of the day, you could have really solved the problem eventually. But why do you think, what was the reason that the company did not try to help you get you out so that you could personally solve the issue?
So you'll have to dig a little into the history of Everon, but Everon has been in pain for about 2 years. It's a much I could talk on that one question for 20 minutes. That's a presentation, in fact, I've been making to business schools, because I've spoken at a few business schools, and there I talk about ethics in crisis management. And so the simple matter, or in a nutshell, the answer would be that Everon has been going through so much rough weather over the past 2 years before this happened, that all the stronger people, all the real talent, all the people with belief, integrity, strength had already left, and the people who had remained in the company had very little faith in what the company stood for, right? So although they had, although they had a new management, although they had new ownership, that management team and that ownership was actually sitting in Dubai. And they had done nothing to change the management team in India. They had done nothing to be able to bring about change. Although they had purchased the company in October of 2011, and this whole thing was happening in December 2012. I was also brought on board in October 2012 because they finally realized after a year that new management needs to come in. But there just wasn't enough inherent strength in the company within Everon. Now, there was a lot of strength and a lot of systems and belief in GEMS, which was the acquirer, which is now the owner of Everon. But they were sitting in Dubai, and they were in a bit of a fool's paradise, because they did not know about the realities of what it will take to get something like this done in India. So the GEMS MD, Mr. Sunny Varki, called my wife, said nice things, said, "Haan, ho jayega." But then he would say ki in a week, 10 days, it will get sorted out, and then 20 days would go by and nothing would happen. And he's the Bharat Ratna awardee I was talking about. So it was just that the company as an entity just wasn't strong enough to realize what it took. So it was common sense to me, it is common sense to you. But somewhere in terms of the people on the ground, the reason they were scared to see me, come and visit me in jail, because they thought ki pakad ke humko bhi andar dal denge. Now that's just cuckoo. That's not how things work. But that was the level of fear that people had. So yeah, sorry, you had a question, miss. His name is Mr. Sunny Varki. And he's a very well-known person in the Middle East. Owns the GEMS group, which has over 50,000 students in CBSE schools across all the GCC countries, schools in the UK. They also have an operation in India now. So, sorry, you had a question, miss.
So, knowing the ground realities about the company you were about to join, why did you join? I was thinking on it, and all I could think of was maybe it's a bit of a challenge that I can turn this thing around. Was that the case? If not, what is it?
So,
is as an aspiring writer, I try to write, I end up writing a few lines and I give up. I think writing requires some level of, a line of thought that you do pen down. But being in jail, was your mind not too upset about things, like not too disturbed to, really write and make it sound like something,
sure.
How did you put pen and paper? How did you do it? Where did you get the motivation to sit every day and try to write?
So two separate questions. So let me answer the first one first. When I got into Everon, I did not understand all of this. That's why I also qualified. The guy who called me was Anand Sudarshan. Anand Sudarshan is one of the most credible people in the education industry today. He has been the CEO of Manipal for 7 years, and Manipal has completely gone places in that much time. So someone like him calling me is very different from the ex-CEO of Everon calling me. Second was GEMS Group itself. I mean, I had visited them, and I had been an investor in the education space earlier. So I visited their Dubai offices. His son has driven me around in his Lamborghini. I visited schools in his empire, and I know that they're for real, and they run a fabulous operation in the Middle East. So clearly there was funding, And now with people like Anand being on board and calling people like me in, there was the intent to change. That it was a challenge, I knew. How bad or how how strong it would be, some of those things you only find out. So when we're making decisions, we're always making decisions on incomplete information. So you make it on the basis of whatever the facts available. So the facts available did point in a certain direction. That's why I joined. Now coming back to writing, so I also started a novel once and went up to page 25 and I stopped. But I think to write creatively, you have to have a stillness of the mind. You can't have tongues wagging in your head, because then you can't focus on what you want to, the creativity is not coming through. If I had had that stillness of mind in the jail, I would have written a novel. The fact that I wrote about the jail was because that's the only thing I could focus on, and that's the only thing I could think about. And I think a lot of the framing, a lot of the context, a lot of the work to make it into not just a rambling bunch of data, but something which has connection, flow, actually happened after I'd come out. So it was almost like data being turned into, or raw data being turned into usable, valid, relevant, flowing information. That process was in fact, so after a month for about a month after I came out, I was just recovering. I used to get nightmares. I didn't go to office. I didn't talk to anybody for a month. I was just, it was traumatic. It was like post-traumatic stress that you have. And it's only after about a month of having been through that, climbed out of that hole, feeling strong and whole again, that I even looked at my notebooks and said, okay, now let's restart on this and complete this project. So, yeah.
What is the HCL's journey for 1 year, and what's your vision like? What's the roadmap of your HCL?
HCL Learning.
Yeah.
So we are a small business that basically takes content into, small in the HCL context, we take content into schools, and we provide schools with a set of hardware along with the full content, which is CBSE content that goes from grades K through 12, which is used by the teacher in addition to or sometimes instead of a blackboard. So that instead of drawing a digestive system, you can get a full 2D animation and so on and so forth. And where that business is going, so it's still taking shape, but there is a lot of opportunity in the Indian education space. There's a lot of unmet needs, there is a lot of gaps, teacher quantity and quality being the biggest of those. So I think we have a long way to go. This whole industry is struggling a little bit right now because the leaders are looking a little shaky. But so SNS, so the nice thing I like about the HCL group is that the non-profit is a non-profit and the for-profit is a for-profit. So that is real in my experience. So yes, Vidyagyan is a client of ours. Shivnadar School has taken some of our products, but those tend to be very purely commercial deals where they pay us and we sign contracts and stuff like that. Yeah.
Is it similar to EduComp?
Similar to EduComp, but one part of EduComp. But we are more conservative and more disciplined in our approach, which is why we are still solvent.
So I have a question here.
Yeah.
So here your disasters turned into an opportunity, and that took the form of a Bokaro jail, and you had some learning there. So do you also have any past 3 experiences where you have turned any disaster into opportunities, and what learning came from them? That is one. And any incidents where some opportunities turned into disasters, any 3 where again you will be having some learning? So these 2 questions I have. They are more individual and we can't find on website or any, I think in your book as well. So these 2 questions and one comment, a commentary by Morgan Freeman would have helped, do you think?
So probably helped a lot. And this book still has to go into reprint, so when it does, maybe I should go and ask him. As far as having had, those 2 things happen to me before, I think it happens a lot of the time. In your workplace, you can take a project which is going bad, you can throw everything into it, you can pull additional resources into it, and you can finally turn it into something which is actually a plus instead of a minus. Marriage is a story where there was a point in time when it was looking really, really crappy, And then we worked at it and we went to a counselor and stuff like that and turned it around.
Please, I have another session.
Of course, no problems. So I think that happens all along in life, and stuff goes wrong. I mean, the whole opportunity turning into a disaster is exactly what happened, which is what led me into jail in the first place, right? So that.
Actually, you know about Avalon before, so that is not an opportunity which turned into disaster.
No, to me that was an opportunity. It was, if you step back and you look at the overall thing, I joined a company to take a division, to turn it around, to turn a business around and get something really positive out of it. But instead of that, I landed up in jail and I quit the company in 5 months. So that is a very negative outcome when you look at it from that perspective. Now within those 5 months, I spent a month in jail and I wrote a book, and that happened positively. So I was jobless, I went out, I talked to people, and then HCL happened. Now that again was a positive outcome, and that happens partly because of people knowing you and speaking nice things about you. In the HCL's case, it was clearly that. I had very strong references, and I'm sure HCL would have done, 10 times the normal ref check when they hired me. But I came through, and I guess that's it. But off the top of my head, I don't know if there's anything else specifically that comes to mind.
I read your article in Hindustan Times last week. I think it was there, yeah.
That was a book review, actually.
There was 6-7 points you have mentioned.
That was Economic Times.
Yeah, some newspaper.
Yeah.
Okay.
So all of those don't necessarily land up in the opportunities to. That was just stuff that I do, things that I feel strongly about. So
Great, thanks.
yeah.
Then what do you think as a team, as an organization, how do you build a strong system of ethics so that in your team, I mean obviously not a similar situation, but similar problems don't happen due to lack of ethics. So do you think it can be built as a system, or as a leader one consciously develops it, or is it just a part of the culture of the place?
I think it is part of the culture of the place, but it does have to be developed. I don't think it kind of just happens. So part of it is what you do and how you behave and what kind of, what example you set in front of everybody. But that may not be visible to everybody, especially in a large or a remotely spread out organization like ours. The other is, what are the policies, what are the things that you do, what is the reality that you stand for? And I think that is, over the years, setting an example. So as HCL Learning, if we choose to identify 2 or 3 NGOs and consistently work with them over year and set an example, and these are NGOs which relate to our work and stand for something, and it's a real connection. It's not just lip service because the government said 2% CSR, but something much more solid and grounded than that. I think all of those things get people to understand what you stand for, and I think that's really where it comes from. But it does need to be cultivated. It has to. You look at a simple example, you look at Reliance and you ask what do they stand for. You look at Tata and you ask what do they stand for. I'm not standing in judgment here, but there is a difference in our minds, right? Those two stand for very different things. It's just inherent in that DNA. Now that didn't just happen. As a Tata, you made a conscious choice saying, I will not do alcohol. I will not do, cigarettes. And when you're working for the group, you look at that and you know that, okay, this is a group that stands for something. And it could be a lucrative business. I mean, liquor is a hugely lucrative business. But you say, I'm not going to do this. That's fine. That's what I stand for. It's making a statement.
So you never thought of suing the company for all the trauma?
I thought about it. I thought about it very hard. But what I was told is that what you can do is file a case on the basis of human rights violation. And they said it'll drag on for 5-7 years. You'll have to file it in Ranchi, and after that you might get a reparation of 5 or 7 lakhs. In the meantime, you'll have to be running up and down to Ranchi for those years. So I decided it wasn't worth it. For me, I wanted to move on, and I wanted to get back to normal life. And if this book succeeds, it's probably stronger than having filed a suit for them, because I've not cut any corners. I've written all the names. It's all open there in the book. I didn't send them a copy, but I'm sure that they're aware. I have about 1,500 people who are on my LinkedIn page. Enough of them from Everon.
And that's like a true HCL. Why lose sales?
Can they sue me? Probably. They could sue me for defamation. But like they say, for the book at least, all PR is good PR. So let them sue me. But the fact also is I've not embellished anything. I've not made up anything at all. Not just about Everon, but about the entire experience in jail. So if they do sue me, I think they'll have a hard time proving anything. So.
Is it just the experiences which you put in the book, or is some you try to build a story around it?
Not a story in the traditional sense, but there is experiences and then there is some amount of analysis. The question that was asked about, the question that you asked about how does the system inside work and how is the system outside different and how do you compare those two? So there is all of that. There is some degree of spirituality because you meet all kinds of people. You meet people who pray for 6-7 hours every day and behave in a certain way, and then you have people who don't pray but behave in a different way. And I could relate to the guys who don't pray.
So I have two questions actually. The first is, so when you came out, all right, what was the toughest thing that you had to deal with? And I know you did mention that you decided to write a book about it and come out open about it, but that would have taken time, right? And I'm assuming that for somebody of your stature and at your position, it just gets amplified. When nobody goes through an experience, it's fine. But when somebody of your stature goes through an experience, there's obviously so much more written on top of it and so much more assumed on top of it. So it was very tough for you. So what was the single biggest, probably single most strongest characteristic in your character that helped you deal with it? That helped you deal with it, deal with what was happening with you for the first, let's say, for the first 1 year, which is your strongest character point? That
thick skin.
So you didn't care, and you continued with your life.
After a while, you just let stuff bounce off. Because even now, I get calls, especially with the book coming out. Lots of people will call you and say, "Arey, I heard about this. It must have been traumatic. This, that, and the other." And there is this whole queasiness about how do I deal with this stuff. And you just say, it's done. You let stuff bounce off. You don't let it penetrate too hard. There is things that are visible in the way people talk, look at you, even the way they write emails. There is stuff which is there, and you just have to kind of ignore it and move on. And you act like nothing's changed, that it's just normal. It was something that happened. गाड़ी का एक्सीडेंट हो जाता है, कुछ हो जाता है, ये हो गया. उसके बाद क्या होता है? 1 साल के बाद वापस चलते हो, गाड़ी चलती है, life goes on. That's really what happened. So that's question number 1. Question number 2.
My second question is that you mentioned that you were in the outsourcing business for the first years of your career, and when you came back to India, you decided to pursue a career in learning, in education, and join startups. And even after the incident, you still decided to come back to learning. So my question is what is it that intrigues you, or what is that interests you about this, about this field of education? Because I see. So I personally am not very clear on. You did mention that the industry is still upcoming, but what excites you about this industry? If tomorrow I have to go and join the education industry, what would you suggest? What would you tell me that is exciting about this industry?
So there is a fundamental interest in teaching and learning, I think. So I've taught at the University of Phoenix also. I used to teach there. I've always enjoyed teaching. It doesn't pay you enough, so I can't do it full time. But at some point in time, I probably will. And I think that, the reason that it interests me is, if it was healthcare, it might have been equally interesting, but I had no skills for it. I just feel like what I do should be meaningful in some form or manner. So when I was in outsourcing, I was in sales. I was at the front end. And while we used to obviously calculate, okay, how many $1 million and kitna dhanda kiya and all of that stuff, I also used to in my mind work out and say, okay, if I've done so much, I think I've created employment for 200 people in India. And that gave me a lot of satisfaction. That was the meaning that I got out of my work. And I was at the front end for 7 years. I was based in Chicago. So I think there is meaning in doing something. So if for example, I can make the teaching learning process, improve the teaching learning process of Indian schools, create more richness, create more improved outcomes, create a more interesting teaching methodology, learning methodology than the drudgery that I went through when I was in school. It was a disaster when I was in school. I was never higher than second division. I hated going to school. I hated going to college. It was like a nightmare. The only time when I enjoyed learning was, I think, in XIC in Bombay and in Kellogg. Because there you were actually more focused on learning rather than, hitting your head against the wall, which is what you do here. So I think that's really what drives me is, it has meaning, potentially. Okay, there is a lot of dhanda angle to it, and we can't wish that away if you're in the for-profit space. But then there is a potential. There is some hope that you will actually be able to create something, build something which can make a huge difference. So that's really the reason why. And there's lots of spaces like that in India. Don't sell alcohol though. Or cigarettes. Take the last couple of questions if that's okay, guys.
Yeah, so I have a few questions which are completely jail specific.
Sure.
So I've seen in a lot of movies and TV series, they have these names that they give to people who just come into the jail, the newbies. So did they have any names like that?
No, so let me give you a quick context. There are two kinds of jails in India. I know a lot about this stuff now. There are two kinds of jails in India. There is the jails for the convicts. Okay, those are the central jails. And that's probably a whole other world, which I have no experience with. The jail that I was in is a district jail. That's a jail for under trials. So everybody there is nobody there is a convict. Everybody's an under trial. And most people have not spent like years and years there. The longest is maybe, there were two guys who were like part of the staff who were helping out, and they had been there for about 4 years. So that's the context. The answer to your question is no, they did not have such a nomenclature.
And you said that you could get stuff from outside which wasn't usually permitted. So was there one guy or one specific set of people who could get that, or were the jail authorities involved? How did that system work?
So there were multiple channels. The authorities were always involved, but it was never like you didn't go to the cop and say I needed this. You would say it to one of these two guys who was there for 4 years. He was part of the staff. Okay, which means he would be in the entrance area where everybody would come in. He would be in the visitors area. So he would be able to arrange for stuff. And obviously he would charge a huge premium. So a packet of cigarettes, which is $30, would cost you 60. And that 30 would then be spread across the system.
And how did people get money into the system?
20%. That is the cut.
Okay.
So if you want $1,000, or let's say if you get $1,000, you get 800. 200 goes off.
And the last question is that do they have any kind of special treatment or respect for a person with an educational background?
With a what background? With an education background? No. That's a very good question. So yes. So the average age of the guy in jail is like 20 something, 24, 25. And the average education is probably 10th fail. 10th fail. Yeah, so I actually had two, so I was on a pedestal when I was inside the jail because I was very, very unusual in that circumstance. I had two other roles. One, I was the education guru. So the cops would come to me and say, मेरा लड़का 12वीं में उसको कौन से engineering college में डालें? And sir, आपको क्या लगता है क्या करना चाहिए? And the second thing was translator, because और किसी को अंग्रेजी नहीं आती थी. तो जिसको पोस्टमार्टम रिपोर्ट पढ़वानी है, जिसको भी ऐसे एक्साइटिंग काम कराने, वो सब हमारे पास है.
What can a general reader expect from your book? I mean, is it all about your good and bad experiences in the jail, or there's something more than this?
There is no legal aspect that I've put in the book because I've really written it about what happens inside. So there is a frustration of why it's taken so long with the exit. So, I mean, I couldn't help but keep part of my story in it. Although I've tried to be the lens about the jail, but it is through my eyes. So some of it is my experience. But there's not really much of a legal angle that's in there. I mean, the legality was all before and after. Because when you were in jail, you're actually completely isolated. You only get reports from people who are dealing with lawyers and whatever else is happening. But I've not focused on that too much because I didn't think that was really of interest to people.
So did you appoint your own lawyer or just?
No, the company had a lawyer.
Cool. I think we will conclude this here. Thanks a lot, Chetan.
Thank you so much.